when I was a teenager, environmentalists were the people who were always breaking the laws. The likes of Greenpeace people getting in front of ships. But I was recently at a case, and the people who were Greenpeace were actually employing a lawyer to take a case. So groups like Greenpeace were actually using lawyers. And we need to just take a step beyond that again as environmentalists and start making laws. There are other big lobby groups out there in business, and we need to become a lobby group like that ourselves. In 1996, the Constitutional Review Group recommended that they were in favour of including a duty on the state and public authorities as far as practicable to protect the environment, to follow sustainable development policies, and to preserve special aspects of our heritage. So they wanted constitutional protection, and they asked the government for it. That was 18 years ago, and nothing happened. And really the problem is that we just don't notice the environment. Just to talk about the kind of thing that gets profile, around the time of this poem, Jack the Ripper was in operation. Now, Jack the Ripper killed 5 women, and he probably killed 23 women, but everybody knows about Jack the Ripper. At the same time, in London, there was a great smog. Nobody really talks about the great smog of London, but 2,000 women were killed in that time, and 2,000 men. 4,000 people were killed by the smog, and probably 8,000 people were killed by the smog. But you know, you're walking down a dark alleyway late at night, and you hear footsteps behind you, and you're worrying about Jack the Ripper. But the thing is that we're far more likely to be killed by environmental degradation. I trained as a cardiac technician, and I worked down the road here in the Mater Hospital when the smoky coal ban was brought in. And suddenly the ambulances stopped coming. There was a 15% reduction in the deaths from people having heart attacks, and it happened almost instantly. The smoky coal ban came in, the particle size dropped, and the ambulances stopped bringing people. There was a 10% reduction in deaths from respiratory illness, and a 7% reduction in deaths from all other illnesses except trauma. So illnesses like cancer, whatever. Now, given that 1 in 3 of us in this room will have a heart attack, a 10% reduction or a 15% reduction in deaths is very significant. So that's a couple of people probably in this room alive today because of the smoky coal ban. So while we were worrying about Jack the Ripper, actually, strangely enough, the unexpected heroes that saved our lives were the likes of Phil Hogan and Mary Harney, who brought in smoky coal bans. Another thing, people often say, oh, you know, well, protecting the environment in the Constitution, it's going to cost a lot of money. Well, protecting the smoky coal ban, the saving in money to the HSE was 20 million per year. It has 20 million every year since. So there's actually a saving to our health budget by environmental protection. There's other reasons to protect the environment apart from our health. Tourism, in a study in 2010, 91% of people said they were coming to see Ireland because of the unspoiled scenery and the great environment. Then there's future generations. We share the one planet, and up until 1975, that planet was sustainable. Interestingly, a lot of the research at the time on happiness shows that we were very happy. We were at our most happy in 1977. So it was all around the one time. We may have had terrible clothes and hairstyles, but we were happy and our planet was sustainable. But sadly, since then, we're eating into our environmental capital. And clearly, this is going to have an impact on future generations. At the Constitutional Convention, it was actually heartening to see the amount of grannies that came along speaking about constitutional protection of the environment, saying that they wanted an Ireland for their grandchildren, similar to the one which they enjoyed when they were young. Now, on the intrinsic rights, there's two things about this. There's like a lot of people would take the ecosystem services approach, put a value on nature. You know, apparently the loss of bees to the British agriculture has been 1.5 billion. And maybe that's the only way we can sell it, you know, use a financial model. But I don't know, I think if you put a financial model, you'll also get speculators, you'll get investors, you know, you'll get people who speculate on nature. They won't have the best interests of nature at heart. So just to speak a little bit about intrinsic rights, because I know Janice there brought it up. There was very interesting cases in America about the rights of nature. And now I kind of thought this was all a little daft. You know, how can air have rights? How can, you know, a valley have rights? But I was convinced. There was a case, the Sierra Club versus Morton, where it was actually Disney wanted to put through a 20-lane highway and a ski resort to Sequoia National Park in America, in California. And Justice Douglas said that the trees and the valley had rights. He said that inanimate objects should have standing to sue in court. When he was questioned on this, he said, well, a ship is an inanimate object and it has rights. He said rivers, lakes, trees, swamps and fish still should have similar rights. He said corporations have legal rights. A corporation isn't even a physical thing, but it has extensive legal protection. And certainly under our constitution, property has very strong legal protection. So anyway, sadly, the case was found against the club, but in the end, the development did go ahead and Sequoia National Park is safe. There was another interesting one, this is for the tree huggers among us, in Michigan, Fisher versus Love, where a man crashed his car, his Chevy, into a tree, and the owner of the tree sued the car owner for damages. So in effect, the tree was taking the case. And actually, the judge in the end, he's decided that, you know, that nobody was at fault, neither the tree nor the car was at fault, so the tree didn't get any damages. But I'll just read out the ruling because it's very good. This is a summing up on it. We thought that we would never see a suit to compensate a tree, a suit whose claim in tort is pressed upon a mangled tree's behest, a tree whose battered trunk was pressed against a Chevy's crumpled crest, a tree that faces each new day with bark and limbs in disarray, a tree that may forever bear a lasting need for tender care. Flower lovers, though we three, we must uphold the court's decree. I thought that was great. Then there's the argument for agriculture. A study in Harvard showed that the brand promise for Ireland's food industry is we are green and we can prove it. And actually, if any of you look at any of the Board B ads, I mean, I've looked at them and thought, oh, this is an ad for the Irish Environmental Network. You know, they're all about sustainability, green food, how well our produce is. Our equine industry, I have to talk about that since Cheltenham was on this week. First of all, the Irish National Stud was set up in Kildare because of the quality of the water. The mineral content of the water is so good, it builds really strong bones in the horses. Again, at the Constitutional Convention meeting that I was at in Monaghan, a racehorse owner stood up and spoke about how important clean air is to horses, because he had all the wonderful statistics on how many breaths a horse takes when it's galloping around a racetrack, and how important it is to have very clean air. Our horse industry is worth, just the thoroughbred industry alone is worth 1.1 billion to the Irish economy every year. Now a little bit about perspective. Putting the environment into the law, into the constitution, would give the environment a proper status. It would make the law, give us kind of a big law close up. It would show how important the environment was to us as a people. The Constitution is also kind of it's a philosophical document. It's the things that we hold important. It's kind of where we should put our treasure. And, it really just shows how we got everything wrong. Our property is protected in the Constitution, but we only put our children in it last year, and the environment isn't in it at all. People say, well, look, we have Europe. If we have a problem, well, all you just go to Europe, and your environmental problem is fixed, sorted out, and then everything is fine. You don't need constitutional protection. Well, I was the complainant in this case. Problem with going to Europe, my case took 5 years. Now, if you have something dramatic, an oil spill, or something, something dreadful happen, whatever you're trying to protect is going to be gone in 5 years' time. It works very slowly, bringing a case through the EU. The second thing is that Ireland gets fines when we breach EU legislation. The fines for infringement are €20,000 a day. And quite frankly, the Irish taxpayer has a lot better things to be spending their money on. So we shouldn't need to go to the big law that's far away to sort things out. We should be able to fix this up at home. And constitutional protection would allow us that, to take cases through the Irish courts, not have to keep trotting off to Europe. Benefits of having it in the Constitution: it's tamper-proof, it's safe. It involves individuals participating in a referendum, and that's very important because psychological studies show that when you sign up to something, you tend to follow it through. So people going out and voting for the environment in a referendum, even if the referendum did get passed, those people who went out and voted for the environment were also the same people who are likely to come home and sort out their recycling or take an interest in the environment locally. The Constitution is very easy to find and to understand. I was in touch with the Constitutional Review group, Commission. I was asking, would there be somewhere that we could put all the wildlife information, so that if you had a wildlife case, you could, if you want to look up the Wildlife Act, you'd be able to find it all easily. And I was told that there's 250 pieces of wildlife legislation pertaining to the 1976 Wildlife Act. That's just one of the acts. 2 other pieces of legislation going along with that. So just for someone like me who isn't a lawyer, and I'd say even if you were a lawyer, the whole thing is just really, really complicated. The Constitution would be having it in the Constitution would be just very clear and easy to understand. I'm just showing you this because this is the South African Constitution. They actually brought it into their building. That's a constitutional court. They call it justice under the tree. And the idea is that they, like the elders, they make the decisions under the protection of nature. They have these beams here. They're supposed to be tree trunks, to represent tree trunks. And you see this kind of skylights in the sky. They let the sunlight in, so there's kind of a dappled effect on the floor. So it's as if you're making your constitutional decisions in the forest. Also, it uses bricks from the jail that both Mandela and Gandhi were kept in. This is our campaign. The Irish Environmental Network and the Environmental Pillar put together a campaign to change the Constitution, and we sent it a submission. That's great. Which I've just talked you through, outlining the economic and health benefits. Other groups joined, the Presentation Sisters, Dang and Tidy Towns group. We have about 50 groups that are all calling for this. The Constitutional Convention, that was their topics for consideration. Although recommended in 1996 that the environment be considered, it wasn't. And then under the 2 topics they chose, they didn't choose the environment. If I talk about it anymore, I'll burst into tears, so we won't go any further there. But it could be worse. We could be living in Ecuador, which had really fantastic constitutional protection. And it just shows you that constitutional protection is not enough. You also need an independent judiciary and a good government. We have that in Ireland. They shut down the Foundation Patriarch, which I suppose was the equivalent to our Éireann campaign, because they were demonstrating, they said they were affecting the public peace. The government was selling mining rights to Chinese companies in indigenous land. The government also started firing any judges that took environmental cases in Ecuador. But just before you all get too depressed, there is a proposal for the rights of nature recognition in the EU. If we get 1 million signatures between 7 countries in the EU, we can bring a directive, or we bring a directive to the EU. So at the moment we're drafting a directive more or less based on the rights of nature. It's been headed up by a team in Scotland, and I'll be collecting signatures. I think we need about 10,000 signatures from Ireland. Give me your email addresses. And if the signatures, we'll start collecting them in probably November. And then we will bring this to the EU Commission for discussion, to be included in EU legislation. So I'd just like to give you all a referendum. I'd like you just all to have a look and have a think about this. And if suppose this was the Irish constitutional wording, would you vote for it? So if you think you'd vote for this, would you put your hand up? So I'll just read that. It should be the fundamental duty of every citizen of India to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers and wildlife. And I really like this, to have compassion for all living creatures. What do you think? Would you vote for that? Yeah. That's great. Yeah. I'll just give you see, this is a lovely aspirational one. It's Pennsylvania. This is a more kind of practical one, also very good. The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all the people, including generations yet to come. As trustee of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all the people. Would you vote for that one? Yeah. It's interesting. Now, this is what Ireland, this was what was proposed in 1996. A duty on the state and public authorities as far as practical to protect the environment, to follow sustainable development policies, and to preserve special aspects of our heritage. Just 2 little problems with this. I'll just tell you before we vote, before we're allowed to vote on it. I'll just tell you, did it work out? Yeah. As far as practical, yeah. Now, apparently, as far as practical seems to go into everything. But I noticed the Constitutional Convention when they're putting through the ESC rights. They said as far as maximum resources will allow, which seemed a much better way of phrasing it to me. The other little problem that I had with this, that it was a duty on the state and public authorities. It also should be on the individual. The individual citizens should be allowed to take a case. But anyway, would you vote for that? No. So that's it. So really, I suppose, just to finish up, I suppose the main thing is we just cannot let this drop. Our environment is our natural resource, it's our treasure, natural treasure. It's like our crock of gold, and if we don't protect it, it'll disappear. Thank you.